We are on our way to go meet up with Freebird, who is living in a cave outside of Moab. So we're going to go talk to him and stay in his cave for the night. Freebird is a hiker who I met on the Pacific Northwest Trail on my first through hike. It was very clear right away when I met him that he's been doing this for a while. And only later did I find out that he's been hiking for like 10 years straight. He hasn't really stopped. Just recently he finished his third through hike of the Continental Divide Trail, which completes his triple crown achievement, which means that he's hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Appalachian Trail 3 times each. And he's done a whole bunch of other trails too. So he kind of just does this full time. I don't think he has a house. I don't think he has a car. He doesn't have a lot of worldly possessions. He just lives out in nature. He gave me a long list of directions that we are now trying to follow to get to his cave. So it's a little bit of an adventure just to meet up with this guy. Freebird said that he would make a rock smiley face at the junction that we're supposed to turn at. We came from that way. Looks like we're supposed to go this way.
You can actually see Raven slept up here a few nights ago. Here she slept. But this is awesome. So this is Raven juice. There's 3 figures. There's a looks like a man.
Oh, that's kind of like a turtle on the top.
Exactly, yeah. And there are turtle petroglyphs. We've seen some desert turtles. Yeah.
Yep. Oh,
if they are mountain lion tracks, I've never seen mountain lion tracks before.
Maybe it's like an old historical
are there raccoons
grounds for them.
Could be. You think those are raccoons?
Like a raccoon track.
Maybe it's raccoon tracks.
Could be.
Yeah.
What do you think the zigzag is?
A snake?
Yeah, or that a river, a creek, you know.
Yeah.
Or it could be a symbol for rain or something. I'm not sure. Who knows? I was a business major, economics major in college. And by the time I graduated, I was so disillusioned with rampant greed, Wall Street stuff, that I just, and I also really didn't want to wear a suit with a noose around your neck, you know, the tie. I didn't want to live in a cubicle. I don't mean this to be negative or whatever. It just wasn't for me. I just thought, what am I going to do? So instead of going down that road, which most of my friends went down that road, I decided, well, if I'm not going to do that, and that's kind of what I'm supposed to do, I may as well do what I love the most. And my biggest inspiration by far was windsurfing in my life at that point. And so I decided I'm just going to buy a one-way ticket to Hawaii and go for it, you know, and it's, there was no guarantee I could ever be a professional. There was no guarantees whatsoever, but I didn't care because the alternate just wasn't appealing at all. So I thought I'll go out on a limb and just buy the ticket and move to Hawaii and start windsurfing. So I ended up just spending a lot of time on the water, and I think it was within 3 years. Yeah, within 3 years I was a professional windsurfer. So eventually I had 2 salaries. I had lots of other sponsors as well. Plenty of money, got to travel around the world. And everything was great until I started seeing that there was terrible corruption behind the scenes. And I exposed it with a woman from England, and we were in Japan at the time at the biggest event on the World Cup tour. It was called the Sometime World Cup. It was sponsored by Sometime Cigarettes, unfortunately, a cigarette company. And we exposed this horrific corruption. And I thought that everybody would be on board, all the windsurfers would be on board, but a lot of them weren't because they were making enough money and they weren't necessarily corrupt, but they didn't want to rock the boat. And so at that point I started questioning my career. And then I already mentioned that at the same time I had a business back on Maui. I was living on Maui at the time, where my business partner was embezzling. My business partner's father was embezzling money from us. So I ended up just dropping everything and going to the Appalachian Trail. So the time had arrived. I started noticing, you can't help but notice if you thru hike, very early on, probably I hiked the AT in 1996 for the first time, and then the PCT in 1997. And the first couple hikes, I started noticing that things happened that seemed to be miraculous. The timing, the coincidences, and it makes you think about things. It makes you think, in a lot of spiritual traditions, there's what's known as a oneness. There's everything is connected, and when you start seeing these synchronicities happening, and sometimes just absolutely incredible things happen. I'll give you one example. I was hiking with two women. Raven's here. She was part of this group. There was a woman named Pocahontas on the PCT one year. We were just doing a section of the PCT that year, and Pocahontas had some mental and physical challenges where we could only average 3 miles a day. So we were going extremely slow. It was very hard to make it to the next road to get out to civilization at that pace. And towards the end of about a week hike with the three of us, we were all tired and ready to get to town, and we were trying to get to Shasta, California. And all of us were dreaming about what we really wanted at that point. And Pocahontas wanted a good beer, like a Pilsner or some glass bottle or local high-quality beer. Raven over here wanted a Hawaiian pizza. What I needed more than wanted was we carry vitamin water bottles as our exterior bottle, and my vitamin water bottle was like moldy. I just needed a new vitamin water bottle. So that's what I wanted, kind of needed. And this man pulled up over hitching. He was coming the wrong way, but he pulls over and stops in a BMW, and he said, "If you guys are still here when I get back, I'm just going to do a couple-hour hike on the PCT. I'll pick you up and take you to town." And he started walking off, and then just as he's maybe 15 feet, 20 feet from his car, he goes, "By the way, you guys hungry?" And we said, "Oh yeah, we've been out a week." And he pops the trunk. A lot of people find this hard to believe, but there was a Hawaiian pizza, and there was a cooler with glass bottled beers and a vitamin water. And those three specific things were in the trunk of this one man's car. And that's just an extreme example. I could tell you, I could go on and on and on with stories, but the point is that these synchronicities happen, and I think often, and they seem to happen more often when you're open to them as well, rather than closed-minded. But they do happen to everybody. Maybe we notice them more when we're more open-minded. But I think the basis of it is that everything is connected, that everything ultimately is connected in one. And that would explain these extraordinary circumstances. When people ask me what my goal is or whatever, it's never the trail or the mileage or the finish, especially when you hike enough, the finish is, initially it's bittersweet, right? And then you realize it's really not the finish. Your journey continues. Mm-hmm. It's fun. Oh yeah, I finished this trail or whatever. Here's the monument, here's the border. But the more you hike, the less the finish is important, and you realize that the journey continues. And so my goal isn't to complete another hike. It's not to rack up more mileage like a car. It's to walk in harmony more and more. I don't have a phone. I've never carried a phone. I've never owned a cell phone. In society, if you just look, people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They're busy. Business is busyness. It's the same word. And again, this might sound negative to some people, but I don't mean it to be negative. It's an observation. And so when you're hiking, you've reduced human life down to the basics. You carry as little as possible because you don't want to have too big of a burden on your back. So you have some clothes, you have some food, and a little tent as your house, or a tarp. And those very basics are simple. And so you have much more time to contemplate things and live simply without distraction. And since you're in that frame of mind and you're actually living much more simply, you're going to notice things that you wouldn't normally notice. they become more and more apparent. I'll give you one other example. Raven and I were hiking 2 years ago. I hiked the CDT southbound. So this year I hiked it northbound. And on the southbound hike, Raven joined me for parts of my through hike, and we were on the Gila River south of Doc Campbell's. And we ended up finding this incredibly beautiful campsite. Fall foliage, the sun, it was warm, everything about it was incredible. I knew how much food we had, and I knew that we couldn't really afford to stay there. It was about 10 or 11 a.m. It was still the morning. And normally on a through hike, you never do this, and especially when you don't have the food to do it. And I said to Raven, are you willing to go on rations if we have to? Do you want to stay here? And she had her artwork with her to draw, and she thought for just a second. She said, "Sure, I'm willing to do it." Kind of walking on faith in a little bit, and so it was great. We're like, okay, great. We're like little kids. You set up the tent in the sun, hang out, look at the view. Raven did some artwork, and spent the most beautiful day. One of my favorite days on the whole CDT through hike going south that year. And then, of course, in a few days, we're running out of food, as we knew would happen. But instead of running out of food, something incredible happened. We came upon a register, and it was called the Trail Registry, and it's built on this tree stump. I don't know if you've seen it before. You have?
That, yeah.
Okay. And then we found a garden near the registry, and a lot of the vegetables were already frost nipped but edible. And we were like, yeah, like little kids going around this garden, and like it's been abandoned, clearly. We're not stealing. This is stuff that's been abandoned. And so we collected a bunch of vegetables, and then I thought, I've heard about this guy named Doug the Hermit, and he's mentioned in the register there. I bet you I didn't know where he lived, this legendary hermit. He's a Catholic hermit. I bet you he lives around here. I found this used trail and just followed it about 5 minutes, the two of us, and we came upon this cabin. And I didn't want to scare or startle him if he was inside. And he was like, Doug, and this Doug the Hermit comes out just overjoyed. A few years ago, he said that he would have 3 or 4 visitors a year at his hermitage. And we told him our situation, and we said we were just saying hi and that we grabbed some vegetables, if that's okay, from his garden. He goes, oh yeah, I abandoned it. It's already had a heavy frost. Anyway, long story short, he invited us in, cooked us dinner, and we were like concerned we were going to eat him out of house and home, literally. He said, no, don't worry. Behold, this is your wall of food. And it was a whole wall stockpiled for the winter. At that point, we were going to go on severe rations that day that we ran into Doug. And we ended up with gourmet food, dinner and breakfast, and food to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 7 years ago, I was in Indiana, where I'm originally from, and I met this nomadic couple who I eventually learned was part of this moneyless tribe out west with this guy named Daniel Swellow. Daniel lived without money for 15 years. For 20 years, he was up this canyon and living in a bunch of caves around this canyon. And so I said, that sounds interesting. I'll think about that. And I just followed a bunch of signs, a bunch of synchronicities, and decided to just go for it. And right after that, I saw even more signs that were just, clarifying that this was the choice I needed to make. The very day I made the decision that I was going to go, I passed this church on the corner. It was around New Year's time. There was this marquee on the church corner there. The sign had just changed. It was New Year's time, and it said, best resolution of the year, walk daily with God. I said, okay, I'm going for it. Definitely. And so I spent most of the rest of my money to get out here, plane and bus tickets, and some of my friends were a little supportive, some of them were a little wary, but my family and coworkers were definitely worried for me. A coworker told me I was going to die, and I had to deal with that fear from other people and not let it affect me, but I was definitely fearful. And so I came out here, and I barely had even met Daniel and Brandon, who was in the moneyless tribe then. Didn't know them hardly at all except through Facebook, just a tiny bit. And when the bus pulled up, it was just, I was waiting for my luggage. I turned and looked over my shoulder, and they were all standing outside waving, smiling at me, and just genuine, very warm smiles. And I just knew I was in the right place and joined this really wonderful cave community. And I met Freebird there. He was
Actually
right here at this very cave. We walked in and met, and he was our cave neighbor, and our cave was further up canyon in this, what Daniel called his guest cave. He has a more private cave further up canyon, more secret cave that he winters in a lot. But the guest cave is a little bigger and a lot better space to fit a whole moneyless tribe in. And then eventually I ended up moving around the corner into a little cave that we called Raven's Roost. When I got the name Raven from being up here, Freebird gave me that name. It's really weird how I came to join the tribe is because in the past, I guess in college, I did start questioning things a lot. I was very disillusioned with things. And so when I graduated, I never even got a job in my field, which was just art. I had an art degree. But the whole time by the last few years I was in college, I said, what am I doing this for? What's the point? And I don't even know why I finished. I guess I just felt, I did just feel like lots of people told me a college degree was good for my reputation in the future and for getting a job, and it looked good on your resume. So I just kept going with it, though I had no idea what I was going to do. And so I guess there was that kind of disillusionment with things. And, I did observe lots of problems in our world with the environment and the economy and social problems and so forth. But it was something more that I came to think about later on after joining the tribe and after joining Freebird on a little walkabout. So for me, it was more of like a spiritual guidance thing. A few years before that, after I graduated from college, I was very ill. And I had a hard time making it through the last year of college because I was becoming ill. And after graduating, I became bedridden for a whole winter and couldn't get out of bed, couldn't do hardly anything anymore, couldn't draw, which I love to do, couldn't go outside and go for walks in nature and take pictures and visit friends and even cook my own food, just all the basic things. It was just really a huge struggle. And I just went through this huge transformation during that time. I dropped a really negative relationship I was in for years and changed my whole perspective on things. There was a lot of hurt from the past that I just had to learn to just let go of, drop, which is still a process, but it was a huge drop back then, letting go of all of these things. And then I had a woman praying for me, who I came to find out later was, her background was A Course in Miracles, a book that spun off of Christian Science, which Freebird introduced me to later on in the cave. And I just had this really rapid healing bouncing back after I was in the hospital. And when I was in the hospital, the doctors saw the pain that I was in, and they were just, afterwards, the rheumatologist that I went to see for a few months was amazed how quickly I was recovering based on other patients that he had had in the past. And I knew what it was, that I had let go of these things. I had turned to God. I had just had this whole, this huge spiritual awakening, a part of the process. And it was just wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm grateful now that I went through that. And felt much happier and healthier than I had ever before in my life. And so after that, I learned gradually more and more to listen for that inspiration and to make decisions in my life based on spiritual guidance rather than on personal wants and desires, at least a little more often anyway. So that's what came. That's how the moneyless tribe experience came for me, was because I just decided to listen and be open and say, hey, is this an experience for me or not? And I just went for it.
Do you know what made you sick in the first place?
I'm still having a hard time explaining it, but the whole mind-body thing we're talking about, and the fears and all of these, how would you explain it with Christian Science anyway?
I think often that our physical problems are related to mental issues, psychosomatic, basically, like if we're holding onto a grudge,
Right.
or if we have a significant fear about something, often we'll experience what we fear and have to face that fear. And as we purify the mind, as we correct the errors in our mind, we find that we have a more healthy, more harmonious life.
The following story contains explicit language. We felt that was necessary to portray the character accurately, so we asked Freebird to keep it 100% authentic.
1997, my first PCT hike. I was approaching the Mojave Desert, and back then the only information we had were the Wilderness Press guidebooks, and those were the only maps we had too. Were black and white maps in the books. You'd rip a section of the guidebook off and follow it. And it mentioned that there was a guy that lived on the southern end of, it's called Antelope Valley, specifically on the edge of the Mojave, that offered water to hikers, and that it would be a good idea to grab water there because it might be as much as 26 miles a marathon to your next water. Knocked on the front door and no one answered. And I knocked again, no one answered. And I was like, oh man, there was no vehicle in the driveway. So I sit on the doorstep, and it was like an hour probably went by, and it was well after sunset. It was twilight, getting dark, and this very little traffic on Highway 138. So it's a 2-lane desert highway, and this old Oldsmobile sedan made a turn without a blinker. It idled up the driveway really slow. That old V8 engine was like kind of gangster style, and I saw this really scary looking huge man staring at me intently with long hair and a beard, looking at me as he drove in, and he stopped about like 50 feet past me, and he gets out and he's smoking a cigarette. He's about 6'4", maybe 230 pounds, and he's like, as he starts walking towards me, he's dragging his leg. I don't know if it was his right leg or his left leg, but he's walking like this. He's dragging his leg, he's smoking a cigarette. And he like comes up towards me. I'm sitting on his doorstep, and he goes, you know when someone smoked for like 50 years, their voice is kind of messed up. Mm-hmm. He's like, he takes a drag of his cigarette, and he looks at me, and he gets close enough, I can see his face, and there's knife wounds, there's scars on his face. And he goes, what the hell do you want, you son of a bitch? and I was like, kind of almost shaking, and I was like, water, I'm just typing a PCT, there's a sign for water. And so he's like, he takes another drag of his cigarette, and he's like, I'll tell you what, you son of a bitch. If you answer one question correctly, I'll let you in. And I was like, do I really want to go in? Should I even, if I know the answer, should I give him the answer? And he takes another drag of his cigarette, and he's like, what's the most misconstrued word in the English language? And I was like, I knew the answer. I was like, love. There's great confusion over love and lust in this world. A lot of the love songs are really lust songs. And love and lust are almost opposites. And he's like, damn it, you got it right, you son of a bitch. Now get in there and take a shower, you stink. So I go in and I expected like this disgusting hovel, and it was all meticulously clean. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 little kitchen. Took a shower, come out. He introduces himself as Jack. He's like, my name's Jack Fair. What's your trail name? And back then my trail name was Breaking Wind. It was a different name. I go, Breaking Wind. He's like, that's a good one. He's like, help yourself to anything in the fridge. You're probably hungry. And I was like, okay, thanks, Jack. And I went to the fridge, and all there was an unopened package of hot dogs. No condiments, nothing else. There wasn't anything else in the refrigerator. It was really weird. And I was like, Jack, you want some dogs? And he's like, he's on a lazy boy, leather chair recliner. He's like, no thanks, I already ate. And so I was like, okay. So I boil up. I'm vegetarian now. Back then I ate meat. So I boil up. I probably would have eaten the hot dogs, actually. So I boiled up all 8 in the package. Ate them straight up. No buns, no ketchup, didn't matter. Hungry hiker, you're grateful for anything. And I was really hungry. And he's in his lazy boy, and he starts like reclining, smoking, chain smoking constantly. And he's like telling me his life story. He was with the Hells Angels for many, many years. In fact, he was the enforcer for like the Los Angeles chapter of the Hells Angels. And for many years, crazy stories. And at one point, it was almost like a sermon. He's like, but it was like better than a sermon. He's like so serious. He's like, you know what, Breaking Wind? I've had everything humans crave. I've had drugs, every kind of drug you could imagine. I've had women, tons of women. I've had money, lots of money. And I've had lots of power. And he goes, and they ain't worth shit. The only thing worth living for in this world is love. And I was like, wow, pretty heavy, coming from a guy who speaks from experience, right? And so my plan, remember we were talking about plans earlier today, my plan was to go to bed early, get up at like 4 in the morning, get across the Mojave as far as I could before it became scorching hot. But Jack's stories went on, and I was polite. And I really don't like cigarette smoke. The room was filled with smoke, and he's smoking, and occasionally he would recline further and kind of doze off for a second, the lit cigarette. And then he'd be like this, where was I, Breaking Wind? I'm like, oh man, he's up again. So anyway, finally at 1 a.m. I looked at my watch. 1 o'clock in the morning. It's a little bit after hiker midnight's like 9,
Yeah.
So we're at 1 a.m. He's like, you're probably pretty tired, Breaking Wind. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty tired. He's like, I got a cot for you walkers. He calls us walkers. And it's out in the garage, which is now the Hiker Town gathering spot. So he takes me out there, and there's this one cot. There were very few hikers on the PCT in 1997. And it had square corners, meticulously made. Bed sheets, wool blanket, square corners. Since it was 1, I didn't set my little watch alarm. I was like, oh, I'll just deal with it. I'll get up whenever.
Yeah.
And about 9 o'clock in the morning, there was a flood of light because there were no windows. And it was Jack smoking a cigarette at the door. He's like, Breaking Wind, you hungry? I was like, yeah, I'm hungry. He's like, got breakfast fixed for you. I was thinking, wait a second, there was nothing in the refrigerator the night before. So I walk over to the house, and he has a little coffee table. It was probably an old gambling table. And it had a little tablecloth on it, and it had like china, like probably Salvation Army china. And it was like everything, like eggs, bacon, biscuit or English muffin, orange juice, milk, like the works. But it was only one place setting. And then on the other side of the table, there was nothing. So I like sit down, and I was like, well, aren't you going to eat, Jack? And he's like, I already ate. I was like, okay. So I'm starting to eat my meal, and then he starts acting a little bit nervous, which made me very nervous. I was like, this guy's nervous? Like, how could this guy possibly be nervous? And he kind of leans forward, takes a drag on the cigarette. And this kind of scared me. I was like, oh my gosh, what is he going to say? Why is he fidgety? He's acting nervous. And he goes, Breaking Wind, if you don't mind, I'd like to read some of my poetry over breakfast. butterflies. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I was trying not to have my jaw dropped in front of him. I was like, this guy?
Wow.
Poetry? And I was like, no, great. I'd love to hear some of your poetry, Jack. And he had a whole wad of Xerox copies of his typewritten poems. There was a bunch of them. And he had these little spectacles that he put on. One of those little thin ones that you can look, someone can look above him and look down, right? And he puts them on, he takes a drag of his cigarette, he looks up and he goes, butterflies. You can't make this stuff up. This is incredible. And he looks down and he takes a drag of his cigarette and he goes, fucking butterflies are so fucking beautiful this morning. They're like fucking flying flowers. Fuck it. That was the first poem. Anyway, so I heard the poems, I ate this incredible breakfast, and what I realized really was like, we all have hope. I was like, if this guy can go this far in one human life.
Yeah.
Now, back in the day, in the Hells Angels, they called it the 1% for some reason. I don't know what that meant, that language means, but you had to kill an innocent person to be a member of the gang. And Jack never said that, but he did say repeatedly to me, I have done things that I will regret till the day I die. He says, there's nothing I can do about them now except I can help as many people as possible. And I was like, wow, this guy still has the scars on his face. He's really rough looking, and he's been through a lot. He's done a lot. He was the enforcer for the Hells Angels, and now he's from Hells Angel to Trail Angel. Yeah. Heart of gold. And so I was like, yeah, I've got hope. We all have hope. Amazing.
Many of these interviews that we have recorded for the Mind, Body, Soul documentary project are well over an hour long. Freebird's was almost 5 hours long. Since over 90% of that content isn't going to make it into the final documentary, we decided to turn all of the interviews into a podcast, where you can listen to the full, uncut interviews. It will be called the Nature of Well-Being Podcast, and it will extend beyond the Mind, Body, Soul project. We hope to continue interviewing people about their experiences in nature indefinitely, and that podcast will be available on Spotify.